Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Goho from Home, where we're going to be talking about wellbeing. I'm joined by Rachel and Jess here. I'm going to let them introduce themselves and what they do. But I'm just want to say thank you for joining us again. Lots of you have been with us each week, joining in the conversation. So you probably know the score, but for those who don't, there's a chat box at the side if you want to join in the conversation. If you've got any questions you'd particularly like to ask our guests, then please put them in there and we'll try and get around them as much as we can. And lastly, there's a poll on the side for just if you could fill that in at the end, just so we can get any feedback and improve future webinars. We've got lots of questions we've pre-prepared, so we're going to get through those first of all, and then we have had absolutely loads through with registrations as well. The webinar is only 30 minutes long, so we're going to do our best, but if we don't get through everything, apologies in advance, but we will revisit this topic in a few weeks, so please do ask questions so we can shape the content for the future. So, I'm Stacey Carlson. I'm the founder and MD of Goho. We're an events, PR and communications marketing agency, obviously not doing many live events at the moment, so we're doing everything virtually instead. And now I'm going to pass over to my guest, Rachel. Do you want to do an introduction?
Yes, hi everyone. So my name's Rachel from My Health Coach. I'm a health and executive coach, and my exploration of coaching, if you like, started about 12 years ago when I moved to London, and I got on the tube for the first time, and over the course of about 6 months I realised everybody was very depressed and thought there must be something we could do about that, and that's why I started exploring coaching and mindset. And now my focus is stress and anxiety, because I think that's one of the key things that can really unlock things for people into leading a more healthy and fulfilling life. So yeah, that's me from My Health Coach.
And what about you, Jess?
Hi, I'm Jess McKee. I'm a master trainer for One Rebel, which is a London-based fitness studio. I've been in the fitness industry for around 10 years, and I've been at One Rebel for about 4, although it feels like forever. And over that time, my focus has kind of evolved from shaping bodies into shaping minds. And I'm a big believer that by creating sort of artificial adversity, so challenges in class, can really help people to overcome adversity and challenges outside of class. So everything I do is aimed around strengthening physical and mental health. So in addition to being a trainer, I'm also doing a postgraduate in psychotherapy at the University of East London, and just live, breathe, eat, researching physical and mental health.
Okay. So without further ado, should we get on with some of these questions, see what you guys have got to advise us on? So firstly, what are your top tips on staying mentally healthy during this time? Rach, do you want to start with you?
Yeah, so I think one of the main things, and it's really hard for people to do, but it's unplug completely. Like if you can take half a day, or ideally a day once a week, where you switch off all your devices and just really connect to yourself, and maybe go for walks and do things that your instincts are telling you to do. I think that's probably the biggest thing that I find that works for people.
Yeah, definitely. You got any other suggestions, Jess, that you think?
I really agree with that one. And I think things like comparison, and Rachel's point about unplugging can really help with that. So comparing yourself to other people can often leave people feeling really demotivated. And, you know, we know that social media and stuff is an edited reality, and maybe even in some cases it's not even the truth. So but it has this sort of detrimental effect on people's sort of motivation and self-esteem. So definitely try to avoid comparison. And I think for me, just be really kind to yourself. Like there's no right or wrong way to respond to this. And, you know, I hear all the time, I'll do nothing, but we're never doing nothing, even if you're doing something, and that could be something really nourishing and really important during this time.
Yeah. And I was just going to add to that, one of the bits of advice I keep finding myself giving, like my friends mainly, you know, I've got lots of friends who are actually working, they live on their own, so they're on their own and working and, you know, socializing and everything from their living room, and they're worried about their jobs and stuff. And I just keep saying, like, don't worry about things you can't do anything about. It's just a complete waste of your energy. So just kind of like only well, maybe don't worry about it, but only worry about the things you can have any kind of impact on, because otherwise it's just wasting your energy and stressing yourself out when there's nothing you can do. So I think everyone just needs to try and like step back and assess things, and then just realize that it is what it is at the moment, I think.
Yeah, and nowadays we all try and think our way out of everything, right? We always use this prefrontal cortex to try and analyze everything, to fix things.
Yeah.
And sometimes the answer comes to us when we don't think it.
Yeah.
There's really good apps, or like on YouTube you can find some meditation music or vibrational music, and it's at a frequency that just switches that prefrontal cortex off.
Yeah,
that can be really helpful.
Yeah, we talked about this before actually, didn't we? Because I always have my best ideas. I've got a book next to my bed because I like wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like, oh, I thought of something for that, or a name for something, you know, when you just couldn't, when you're actually trying to think of it, you just have a mental block. Like if you relax.
Or when you're in the shower relaxing, right? It'll come to you like, oh.
Yeah, I haven't got that. I have to start writing on the wall, maybe. I have a waterproof pen.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on. How could people, like a lot of people watching this today are people who are managing teams especially. So we've been asked, how can I support my employees' mental well-being during this time? Jess, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I think a couple of things that stand out to me are just really connecting and, you know, understanding that people are different and people have different needs, and sort of not having less expectations, but being malleable and actually really showing up and listening to the team members. So, for example, someone might all of a sudden be homeschooling their kids, and certain hours of the day might be super, super challenging. I don't personally believe, you know, that people just don't want to do the job. I always believe there's a why. So I think that listening and really, really listening to what can be done to help support people on a one-to-one basis, like go around and speak to the individuals and see how things can maybe be adapted to suit that person during this time.
Yeah.
I think additionally, I think it's really important to show that you're not perfect and that you have these problems you're facing. I think that eases a lot of pressure on the teams instantly when they know that you're going through the same thing as them.
Yeah. I think like some sort of just communicating, keeping it really honest and open, even if you don't necessarily know the answers, but if you do have some sort of inklings, just I know at One Rebel, our CEO reaches out to the entire team every Thursday. We know we're going to get an email update, whatever that looks like. But I think at the moment we are riddled with uncertainty. So anything to feel like you're being kept in the loop and feel like, I don't know, even small little nuggets of certainty, even if that certainty is we're definitely not going to be back for the next few weeks. You know, something that's just a little bit more grounding.
And I've also found that some people are opening like Slack channels or Microsoft Teams or something, and having like a chat that's dedicated to these kind of issues, so that people can feel at any time they're struggling, they jump on, and there could be other team members that is going through exactly the same thing, and just by those people connecting, then you don't have to get involved, but you know, you've just provided the mechanism for them to kind of help themselves, I feel like.
Yeah, and I was just going to actually slot in one of the questions that we had from one of the guys who was watching when they registered is, are there any telltale signs that you think that might suggest that some of your colleagues or your employees are struggling with the current climate? Is there anything you could recommend to look out for?
I mean, back into what I said earlier, I don't think anyone wants to, like the majority of people don't want to lose their job, and they want to come through this. So if there is any sort of despondency or sort of someone looks like they're not making an effort, I would just want to unpack that with them a little bit and just really honestly reach out to them and see what can be done to help. I think just anyone that's maybe looking a little bit like lackluster or out of character, find out what the root of that is, what's going on at home.
Yeah, I think that's a key one for me, the out of character, because if somebody's usually really bubbly and they come on a video call and they're really quiet, that's a very strong telltale sign, and the reverse is also true. So it really does depend on the person.
Yeah, and just because you just mentioned video call, I was just going to bring in another question we had as well, actually, which is, can some of the common wellbeing ideas and suggestions, such as video calls and virtual socials and the many millions of virtual pub quizzes that have popped up, might they not be of a benefit to introverted staff? And what would you suggest to overcome that?
So I think that's a really, really pertinent one for me, especially because I'm a huge introvert. And I actually find the video calls, like I was on a networking call this morning, and I find that less draining than going to an in-person networking event. The flip side of that is you have to balance it. As an introvert, you have to be really careful that you don't overload yourself. So if I'm going on 2 networking events a day, for example, that would kill me. I just couldn't do it. But it's having that self-awareness of what you can manage as an introvert, and just like trying to be flexible with your teams and your line managers as well.
So would you suggest, like, if a company was kind of almost enforcing virtual team meetings and making everyone have the video on, do you think that's a fair thing to do, or do you think that could be detrimental to some people's well-being?
That's a really tricky question, because I think that I can totally see why they're doing it, and my instincts is to say it's a bit unfair, but I think what I would be doing if I was the line manager in that instance is reaching out to those people that I knew would struggle with it, or asking for people to come to me if they had any concerns with it, and trying to find that happy medium, that middle ground with it.
Yeah, it's all down to communication in the end, I think, isn't it?
Well, that forced fun is a bit of an oxymoron, isn't it? Like, I don't know, maybe I agree with Rach, like reach out, but I don't necessarily think that anything fun should be forced.
Mandatory. No.
Yeah. Okay, we'll get back to the other questions now. The pre-plan. Sorry. So, what advice, I think we'll start with you, Jess, on this one. What advice can you give on exercise, eating, and boosting your immune system?
Well, I think something to remember is that it's a really hard time. And number one, be kind to yourself. And I think that making some efforts is better than no effort. So sometimes we could maybe set ourselves really ambitious tasks, which just result in us feeling really demotivated if we don't do it. For example, you might be like, I'm going to run 10K this weekend. And you wake up and you feel really drained after a week on Zoom and meetings and feeling fatigued. So you don't do anything, but you're better off just going for a jog around the block and doing something. So I think something rather than nothing. And I think making sure you are sleeping, going back to basics, making sure you are eating nutritious foods that's going to leave you feeling good. And we all know that exercise makes us feel good. And I think there's some truth bomb that we have to acknowledge, and that is that it's not ever easy. Sometimes it's easier and sometimes it's not. And even someone who's been in the fitness industry for 10 years, I still have to be like, come on, Jess, get out the front door. And there's always that activation energy. There's always, that's part of it. So be kind to yourself, but know where to draw the line between being too soft and kind of having to adult yourself a bit and be like, it takes effort. Getting started is the hardest bit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think doing things like consistency is key with it as well. It's like less is more, but consistent less. If you're struggling to do a 30-minute run every day, then don't do a 30-minute run every day. Do 10 minutes of stretching. Don't even call it yoga. Just sit down on a yoga mat if you have one, or on the floor, and just stretch as your body is telling you to stretch, and learn to kind of listen to your gut.
Yeah, I think I had that issue as well, because I actually had coronavirus a little while ago, and I was really ill, obviously, for like a week, and then I was really gutted because I'm usually going to One Rebel classes and going for a run and doing all this stuff, and I really struggled with my breathing after I recovered. So I felt fine, but I was just out of breath all the time. And it was really annoying me. And then I thought, this is just stupid that couldn't run anywhere near 5K. I could only just get around the block, to the end of the street. And then I thought, just take a step back for a minute here. You've just been really ill. I couldn't get out of bed a few days ago. At least, I can go downstairs. I couldn't come downstairs, and I could do that again. So I just broke it down into much easier, more digestible little chunks. And now, I'm back up to running 7.5K. So still not back to what I was, but I'm doing that. And, and I've actively and then yesterday I didn't go for a run. I did a stretch. I don't particularly like yoga myself. So I did a stretching class on One Rebel TV, putting a shout out there for them. It's really good. But I just had a stretch yesterday because that's what I felt I needed. So I do think that's really important to also just listen to your body, and you don't always have to do the things you think you should do because everyone tells you.
And like
Really.
every realm of our life has been adapted right now. So it's ambitious to think that our health and fitness goals are going to be exactly the same when we've got the equipment and the trainers and everything that we would have in normal life. So everything's got to be adapted and flexible and just go to the now.
Yeah. And stretching is one of those things that's really kind of underappreciated because, I mean, Jess mentioned sleeping earlier. If you just do 5 minutes of stretching before you go to bed, it can do wonders for your sleep. And like, I don't know if anybody else has experienced this, but when you've got anxiety, sometimes you wake up in the middle of the night, you're still restless or you can't get to sleep because you're restless. And literally 5-10 minutes of stretching before bed can actually alleviate that massively. So
yeah, I haven't tried that. I'm going to try that, right?
Yeah.
And Darren always wakes up as well in the night and he has restless sleep. So I'm going to get him to try it as well. We'll report back on how that was. So I think moving on from that, it flows quite nicely, as we've been asked, is how can I reduce my stress, fear and anxiety during this time? Rachel, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, so
big question.
It is. Where do I start? So we've already talked about kind of anxiety manifesting as kind of discomfort and restlessness, but it can come in lots of forms, and fear is slightly different, where it kind of feels like panic, and I myself have experienced this as well, where you feel like there's almost panic waiting in the wings for just to come flooding at you. And I think one of the things to remember is we're all human, we're all doing this, and we're all adapting to this in the best way we can, and we're all doing a really good job at it, I think. And I think that fear and that anxiety can be eased by us just remembering to tell ourselves that. It is strange. It's the brain's way. The brain has this, because we've talked about this before as well, so sorry about this, but the brain has this part of us that is trying to keep us safe, right? And it doesn't like change. Its way of keeping us safe is to avoid change. And this is huge change. So it's perfectly normal that we're going to feel anxious and fearful. So I think even remembering that's normal, and it's not because our world is turned upside down. It's just because our brains are trying to keep us safe and it's freaking out because this doesn't seem normal to us.
Yeah. And I was just going to, you touched on it. I think it's really, really, really important to focus on the positives as well. And as an employer, like as a manager, for me, I mean, I try and do it all the time anyway, but even be more so, make sure you praise people or say well done when they've done something, right, really good, to try and be acutely aware of that almost your community gets back to communication again, but to make sure that, because even if you think it, or you might, when you're in the office, you're just going, oh, well done, or smiled. But obviously when we're all separate and we're in this weird new world, that doesn't necessarily always come across as well. And so I think making sure you go out of your way to say well done and thank you as well is a good thing to do.
Yeah.
This is an even bigger question. These are big questions we've got here. But the next one we've got is, how do I juggle my work, my family and me when they're all in the same space? So Jess, you look like you're ready to pounce on that one.
I know just little things like, dressing for when you're at work as opposed to dressing when you're not can help. And a lot of people have spoke to that in general. And I think to take that another layer, I mean, for example, I live in a 1-bed flat, so I haven't got different rooms for when I'm at work and different rooms for when I'm sort of having leisure time. But things like setting the lighting, different smells, like really try and change the atmosphere of the space for this is work time or this is family time. And so not just clothes, but lighting, light some candles, make smells, put some music on, different times of things to really shift the time of day. I think can be helpful.
Mm-hmm. And colour therapy as well. If you've got a colour light, it's really helpful for that.
I've got this little coloured light. You can't see it from here, but I bought one for my granddad and my nan. And you touch it and it lights up. They're like a pair. And then when I touch it, it lights up at his house, so they know that I'm thinking of them, and the other way around. Really, it's really cute.
Yeah.
Called friendship lamps. Everyone have a look online. We start charging people for these plugs.
The other thing I was going to add was, it's escaped me now. Oh yeah, so it's the same expectations about how much you have to get done in a day. shouldn't apply in this new world. And we often, especially people who work in an office, they go in and they think, I have to do my 9 to 5 or my 9 to 5:30 or whatever, and I have to be seen to be working that whole time. Well, we can't be seen to be working that whole time when we're at home. So it's really helpful to get your teams to plan their day up front in terms of what I have to do, not how many hours I have to spend. And if they do that within 4 hours, then that's grand. Let them go and spend some time with their kids. And so that there should be a shift from time to accomplishments. I think that really helps that addressing the balance at home.
Yeah, we've kind of done that at Goho a bit because Liv, she's got a little girl, so she's having to, she's not a nursery anymore, obviously, so she's having to sort childcare with her partner. So, she does an hour here and it, but that's it's fine because it's, she does the things that can be done on a night or whenever when I live in bed. So it's about being really as flexible as you can be, for sure, as an employer. And how can I feel less isolated and lonely if I live alone? Who wants to start on that one?
Jess looked like she was about to.
I've got a very expressive face. I think one thing is just really breaking the silence and talking, and because the thing with this is everyone is going through something, so everyone is trying to survive right now. So whereas you could be going through a breakup or grief, and your friends are hyper aware of that, right now everyone's kind of just trying to survive. But if you're struggling, talk to someone and be really honest and open about that, and try and make times to connect to people. I'm also a big believer, and this is not that helpful, but in just getting to really be comfortable with yourself. So maybe journaling and exploring. I feel like we should be able to be with ourselves for long periods of time and enjoy our own company. And a lot of the time we don't, and that's quite human, but it's interesting to look at why that is, and maybe just journal and explore it.
And it's interesting because we talked about introverts earlier, and there's the flip side of that we haven't talked about is extroverts, right? And they're the ones that are struggling and feeling lonely, not the introverts. And so everyone has their own problems. So I think that extroverts, for me, it would be things like setting up a virtual games night, or having a wine date, a virtual wine date or coffee date with somebody, just impromptu, the same way that you might say to somebody, coming up to the end of the day on a Thursday or Friday at work, fancy a drink? Well, we still can do that, it's just virtually now. So,
it doesn't even have to be a quiz, it can just be a drink and a chat.
It doesn't have to be something.
But a virtual quiz you can do with getting a few people together, and it can do like a pub quiz type thing. And so things like that just increase the connections.
I think as well there's a responsibility on all of us to have more awareness and empathy, and just be, if I was speaking to a lady last week actually, and she said, that she lived on her own, and I was speaking to her in a work capacity, but then I sent her a personal message and said, look, if you ever want to chat, or if you want to just catch up for 5 minutes, or if you just want to moan or anything, feel free to ring me. And then I've checked in on her each week, and she was like, I really, really appreciate it. I don't know her very well, it was from a work capacity, but just being aware that I was talking to a friend actually just before this, and she was saying we're all in this same boat, but actually we're also all in completely different boats. I'm very lucky. I've got a house and a garden and, 3 bedrooms with me and my partner both work in a separate room and have a totally different area for our evening, personal life. Other people might be in a 1-bedroom council flat with no outdoor space. There's another person I know who's got, he lives with his grandparents. So he's had to properly isolate because he can't go out at the risk of bringing anything back. And they live in a tower block in Hammersmith. So he hasn't even been able to go out for 7 weeks now. So even though we are all in this together, there is also we're also not all having the same experience. While some of us are actually this isn't too bad, other people are literally, it's not too bad at all. It's pretty, they're having pretty awful time.
I think people are really, really struggling. There are sort of therapy places and professionals that it's opened up doors to being able to get so much help at home with regards to talking. Looking at Mind Charity or the BACP website and seeing if you actually need someone to talk to, you can do that via FaceTime, emails even.
Yeah, and there's the NHS responders, the voluntary service. I'm a volunteer for them, and you don't have to. You can put something up for help with that if you want something picking up from the shops, for example, or a prescription. But you can also just ring and talk to someone and just have a conversation. And they're a stranger, but sometimes if you haven't spoken to anyone for ages, there are people who like me just like talking all the time. So that's another opportunity that you can take advantage of, for sure. And you can always email us at Goho, because we're always on the end of a line. But we've had some good questions come through as well. So I'm going to start on one of those, if that's all right, ladies. So we've got one here saying, have you got any tips on connecting with new team members or people that you don't know at all?
So I'm assuming these are like people that have maybe come on board just before lockdown that you didn't get to.
Yeah, and we have even had some people. There's been some managers on here who've like hired people and they're onboarding them literally virtually throughout this process, which is obviously completely alien, completely brand new, because no one's ever done that before, I don't think.
Yeah, so in the same way that you would do in an office, we would go knock on the door, send them an email to meet for coffee. You do that in this for like method. You still reach out to them and go, you want to chat, and just it's all virtual now. So I think it's weird that we all have this automatic assumption that just because we're all inside and it has to be by video, that the way of doing things has to change. It doesn't. Those things can still remain the same. And even like people have, like, Zoom's quite a popular platform for these kind of things as well, where they have their own personal meeting rooms and people have their own links. So like friends would have their link and they'll like leave it open permanently. And then people can just drop into the meeting room, go, hi. And it's just like popping into somebody's office. Yeah. Without having to call them.
That's a good idea. Yeah. There's also that facility on House Party, which to my disadvantage has not gone terribly well a few times, when like ex-boyfriends have popped in and stuff. I'm like, oh no. So on to the next one. This is a really good question. Some people during this time have become very anxious, focusing on the negative and subsequently feeling worse. What is a good way to focus on the positive while still acknowledging how people feel and respecting that for many across the world, their lives have turned upside down?
Rachel, you're going to say something?
Yeah, so I'm going to say something really corny at the risk of pissing people off. And the opposite, the antidote to that is gratitude. So you cannot feel anxious when you're just focusing on the gratitude. And instead of going, it'll all be fine, I'm just going to think positive. If you focus on the things that you're grateful for, it doesn't leave room for those other things. And everybody always has something that they're grateful for. It just sometimes takes a little bit of work to get to it.
Oh, that was a nice answer. That's made me feel all happy and grateful that you're on our webinar, Rachel.
And as well, with anxiety, I think a lot of that comes from anxiety is based in future thinking, so like fear and forward thinking. So just what can be a really helpful task, it sounds so simple, it's just literally to stop and name 5 things that you see in the room around you, and it brings you back into the present. Or things like feeling your feet and stuff that takes you out of the future and into the present.
Yeah, and those apps that I mentioned earlier, or the YouTube videos I mentioned earlier about, there's one that's a sound therapy, and it's basically just a certain frequency, and it's like a buzzing in your ear, and it's at a frequency that does different things to your brain, and those are really good for anxiety because it just literally switches off that thinking pattern.
Try that.
Yeah. If we can send out, I have an app that I use which is really good for it. I'm happy to share if we can send out to all the attendees afterwards.
Yeah, we can send it out, or people can email and ask us for it. So everyone, if you had ticked that you didn't want to be contacted by us, but if you can send us an email and then we can reply to you if you do want some of that information. The email's hello@thisisgoho.com. We've just got time for try and get another question in. So again from the same person. So coming back to the norm after lockdown is going to be a big change for people again to get used to after we've just done this massive change. So have you got any advice for preparing on the exit of lockdown? Even though I feel like we're just still kind of recovering from going in it, but anything?
Rachel.
I'm saying from my perspective, I'm trying to plan for all eventualities for everything for my team. And like you guys said earlier, I'm being really open and transparent with them about everything. So there are kind of we've got sort of 3 different ways it might look, what normal might look like and what we might go back to like, but they know that I can't tell them the absolute answer. But I think because I am being open and honest and transparent with them, it's kind of being hopefully making not the anxiety less and the worry less, because they know that they're the sort of options, and they can then start thinking, okay, well, this might be it or this might be it.
Yeah, I think that's basic. So some level of certainty in the uncertainty, even though you can't say for sure. And just being really, I think just being really, really transparent, really, really honest. So things aren't kind of jumping out the blue to the team that they had no idea about, because that's just going to feed kind of not having any level of trust in the world, and they need to be able to really trust that team.
Yeah. You've got anything else you want to round off with? We're just about the end now. That's gone really quickly, hasn't it?
Yeah, flew by.
Okay, so thank you everybody for taking part. We're going to call it a day now because we have to finish. We want to make sure we're on time. We have got a few more questions we haven't got through, so we'll try and put some of those into a session for a few weeks and revisit that. So keep an eye on our upcoming events. And thank you all so much, and thank you Rachel and Jess for coming on board and giving such good advice and being such wonderful company. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Lily.
Cheers everybody. Yeah, see you soon. Bye.
Bye.